let's talk about the other situation that is kind of plaguing and constantly an issue here in the Adirondacks. I'd love to hear your opinion on it, which is the parking situation at trailheads. Obviously, there's so many people coming up here. And again, there's no right or wrong answer. We're just having a discussion and just bringing up our kind of opinions on the subject from having grown up here and lived here and hiked here and whatnot. But clearly the trailheads, you can't get a parking spot there these days, and people are making their own parking because we have so many people coming up, which to me is a good problem to have. But what's your thoughts, just general opinion on what the Adirondacks needs to do regarding parking?
Well, there are two opposing schools of thought, and that is, do you adjust the amount of users or do you adjust infrastructure? So some people will say, all right, look, we've got a bunch of people hiking up in the high peaks, and once the trailhead's full, I don't know what to tell you. Okay, so that would be an example of you're limiting use. You're not going out of your way to limit use. It's just that your infrastructure is only going to accommodate so much use. I'm of the other school of thought. So when I see a full trailhead, I immediately think another trailhead should be built. That's just how I look at land management. I think use should not adjust to infrastructure. I believe that infrastructure should accommodate use. And so a great example is this, and it's a very odd DEC regulation that's caused people a lot of headaches, and I don't understand the logic behind it. So this regulation has probably been around since the beginning of time, where if you get to a lean-to and it's full, and you're not allowed to camp next to the lean-to. And a lot of people don't know this, but I know this because I used to work as a seasonal ranger up there. And I'm thinking, what? I don't understand. I mean, obviously the area around the lean-to is already impacted. It's hard soil. It's obvious that people are stomping around there, and it's obvious people are going to camp there anyway. So why not just camp next to the lean-to? Or what I would say is, why don't you build a couple really nice tent platforms next to the lean-to? And you don't have to use dimensional lumber. I mean, you could just fall 4 logs and then fill it with mineral soil, and now you have a nice tent platform next to the lean-to. So that's a good example of where the state has chosen, we're not going to have infrastructure accommodate use. It's just that the lean-to is full, go away. And I don't really think that's very accommodating to visitors, especially ones that are paying New York State taxes. So if you're a New York State resident, I think it's a reasonable accommodation to say, hey, look, if the shelter's full, can you build just a nice tent platform next to it so I can set up my tent when I hike the Northville Placid Trail? So those are the two basic schools of thought. I'm of the latter belief that, stopping people from going to the high peaks it's kind of like trying to stop a tornado. It's like you really just can't do it. So you might just want to resign yourself to the fact that a lot of people are coming to the high peaks. So let's expand infrastructure, which I think is a reasonable accommodation. What do you think?
I am 100% in agreement with you. I think that our infrastructure needs to support the use that we have and the growing use, and therefore we need to grow and evolve as well. It's, there's so many places around this country that would just be thrilled to have the problem, quote unquote, that we're experiencing up here, with more and more people want to come here, and in an area where there really is no industry outside of the word tourism. It just seems like this is what we want. Let's evolve and accommodate this, and not try to shoo people away. And I find more so than not, and I'm sure I'll probably lose all my listeners now, but I find that the majority of people that are saying we want permits, or there's too many people here, get them out of here. Well, sure, you might come up to the Adirondacks once or twice a year, and of course you want there to be less people when you come here. I totally get it. I get it. It's nicer experience when it's not. You don't feel like you're walking in a mall when you're walking up a mountain. But we need that. We need that here so this place can survive and continue to be what it is. So I just feel like the people wanting nobody here aren't impacted whatsoever by that thought process. Whereas the people here, the businesses, the towns, our neighbors, they need that. So I just feel so strongly, and I have this conversation often, that our infrastructure needs to change to accommodate this, and that we should embrace this as a positive, not as a negative. Because, I've heard so many times, well, it wasn't like this in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, well, there was a lot of differences in the world in the 70s and 80s, in the 90s, and the 2000s. Like, the world changes, so let's evolve with it, because there's so many towns in the park that are just dead, who who could be alive and thriving if, we would all kind of evolve with that. And I guess that kind of transitions me to my next question, and this is a hot ticket conversation right now here on the social media pages and on the internet, is a permit system. Dun, dun, dun. The Adirondack permit system. So for you, I already know the answer. I'm guessing I know the answer, but is that the way to go? You're an Adirondack native, so do you obviously don't feel like discouraging people from coming here is the right move, and neither do I. So what are your thoughts on the idea of a permit system, and why would it be good, or why is it a terrible idea?
Yeah, I have heard that idea of a permit system. I'll give you, because I love alternate examples. I'll give you a theoretical example of kind of how I look at this. So some people are saying, look, you need a permit system, let's say, to go into the high peaks. And they do some permit systems here in the West. I know, I think the John Muir Trail and stuff out in Sierra Nevada, you need a permit system. I'm not a fan of the permit system. I've actually never gotten a permit in my life. I just hike in national forests and state parks where you don't need permits. But the example I'll give you this, we were just talking about, do we want to limit people coming in, or do we want to expand infrastructure? And a moment ago, you have these people, and they're, these crusty old hikers, and they're saying, oh man, the place is totally ruined. It wasn't like this in the 70s. And I immediately thought, back in the 60s, if you wanted to get to the Adirondacks, you would take Route 9. That was the only way pretty much to get up. It went through Chestertown, Screw Lake, E-Town, etc. And what did they do in 1965? They built the Northway, right? They didn't say, oh, no, we're only going to have Route 9, and now Route 9's so crowded, you need to get a special driving transportation permit to access the Adirondacks. That's absolutely ludicrous. And so I don't understand why, because trails and roads, shelters, bridges, everything, it's all infrastructure. So I don't see any difference between the Northway and a trail, or a lean-to and a government building. There's still infrastructure funded by the taxpayers who are looking for reasonable accommodations and services. So what we did, we built the Northway to accommodate increased use. Okay, we didn't say, oh, no, we're only going to have Route 9, and now only 100 people a month can drive up Route 9. You got to get a permit, right? That would be absolutely ridiculous. And I don't see why people think that's a good idea just because you're in the mountains. Well, no. If you want to hike into Lake Colden, you get a permit a year in advance. And once we run out of permits, I guess you're not going into Lake Colden. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. Now, what confuses it more, and this is not going to go over well if they make a permit system. Let's say that all right, we'll keep it simple. You need a permit to go into High Peaks Wilderness area. Okay, fine. And let's say I live in Keene Valley. I was born and raised in Keene Valley. I have property that butts up against High Peaks Wilderness area, and I want to go through, just go for a walk out behind my house through state land. If there's a permit system, you're telling the guy who grew up in Keene Valley, whose great-grandfather settled there or whatever, that to take an after-dinner stroll in the woods behind his house, he's not allowed to unless he can secure a permit. People don't realize that it's a patchwork of private and public land. So it's kind of different. Like we have Rocky Mountain National Park here. I've never been to it because it's really crowded. I just go to Pike National Forest instead. You get a permit to enter the park. But the Adirondacks, it becomes very confusing, and there will be a lot of conflict because you're already in the park. So
Totally.
you live in the park, but now you're going to tell me I need a permit to hike the mountain behind my house, which I've hiked every year for the last 40 years. I mean, how does that work without severely pissing off a lot of people?
So many people and really pissing them off. I can't wrap my head around the arguments for the permit system. And you so often hear people too say, well, there's a permit system for hunting and for fishing. Well, those are drastically different. There's so many more elements involved with harvesting game, and part of that is to, so they can have a better idea as to how many deer are out there, how many deer were being harvested and fished, and the money for that goes towards conservation. And they're just, it's so much different when you talk about permit systems with hunting and fishing versus literally walking in the woods. Hiking is, that's all you're doing. You're walking in the woods between some trees. Let's keep it as basic as it is. And
Right.
yes, as I feel like, I mean, as someone who lives here in Lake Placid, the idea of just, oh, it's 2 o'clock, it's sunny, I'm gonna go for a quick hike. That is like the benefit to living here, and that's like the beautiful thing. So the idea of you couldn't do that. Oh no, you know what? 2 months ago, I didn't get the permit and for this very day. Shoot, I can't go. I mean, I just would never. I just won't. I would not get one. There it is, flat out. I just wouldn't abide by it. I couldn't see myself doing that. Um,
Right.
you know,
And you could get into the situation where, all right, James didn't get his permit 6 months ago, but it's kind of a stretch, but it could certainly happen if you think about it. It's like the person who bought the permit you should have bought never showed up and used it. And so you could have gone hiking anyway because they didn't use their permit. It's just really weird. And I have heard the hunting license, fishing license thing. But the distinction is you don't get a hunting license to go into the woods and hunt.
sure.
You get a hunting license to hunt. It's not to enter the land. It's that you can shoot an animal.
Yeah.
It's not a permit of access. It's a permit of activity. That's why they're totally different.
Totally different. Yes. There's just not even a close comparison to the two things. And I hear that so often. I'll quite honestly, I'm surprised that I hear it so often, that comparison.
Right.
But
And I grew up on Friends Lake in Warren County in the town of Chester, and I was fortunate enough to grow up fishing. It was just a great place for a kid to grow up. And so each year I would get a fishing license, and I would fish on Friends Lake. But this is the thing that people don't realize is I'm buying the fishing license to fish, but I could go on Friends Lake whenever I wanted. So again, it's about getting your license for a specific activity, not for access to the land.
totally. And that's what you're doing. You are out there fishing, not just walk. If you're walking in the water, swimming, no problem. If you have a
Right.
fishing pole in your hand, back up. That is a problem. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, you don't get a swimming license.
No, no.
Not yet.
There, there's another license another permit system I would not pay for. The
Yes,
swimming.
I
I'm
already
not going to
paid
get the
that.
swimming license.
Yes. Yes.
So, so as we progress here in the world and more people are retreating to the outdoors and getting outside, which I see as just the most positive of positive. Yes, it comes with, everything is pros and cons, but I find that the pros are just far more than the cons of people wanting to experience the outdoors. What are your thought processes and your opinion on, with more people going to the outdoors? Is this overall a good thing, or is it overall a more harmful thing?
Well, overall, it's a great thing. And I can use myself as an example. I was born in Poughkeepsie, so I grew up in an urban environment. And when I was 12, my parents dragged me kicking and screaming to the Adirondacks. And in hindsight, it was the best thing that ever happened to me to grow up in the Adirondack Park in a small town and hunt and fish and ski and snowshoe, etc. I just fell in love with it. And it's obvious I have a deep appreciation and just pure love for nature. And so I have an interest to recreate responsibly. And so I'm out there and I'm not pooping in streams and I'm not carving my name on signs and cutting down trees because